Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
Thursday, and all of today's guests, including Thomas Drance, standing by, are brought to you by the Vancouver Giants. Giants are back at the LEC Saturday night. They were on that Prairie road trip.
Yep.
They take on Prince Albert. Puck drop is at 7 p.m. The Raiders, Rick. You work in Prince Albert?
No, that's one area, no.
Grab a White Spot pack for any game, which includes 4 tickets and a $40 White Spot gift card. Pack starts as low as $129. That's a great deal. Head to VancouverGiants.com to grab your tickets for every game. Canucks continue their Eastern road trip in Florida tonight to take on the defending Stanley Cup champion Panthers. Here to talk about it from The Athletic, Thomas Drance. Thomas, a day earlier than normal. How are you?
Doing well, yeah. Thanks for accommodating me. I fly out to Philadelphia tomorrow at the time that your show is airing, so I appreciate you guys getting me on today.
Whatever it takes to get you on the air, we'll come through for you, Thomas. You don't have to worry about that. Now, listening to you on 650, and of course we did the hit with you yesterday, you have some historical numbers that tell you Elias Pettersson is going to be just fine. I'm putting you on the spot, bringing up those historical numbers, but it was very interesting.
Yeah, look, if you go and look at players that have played 400 games before they turn 26 and have produced at a point per game rate across those 400 games, you're going to get a who's who list of Hall of Fame level players. We're talking, Paul Correa. We're talking, obviously, Crosby and McDavid. We're talking Mitch Marner would be like on the low end. Jason Spezza on the low end. Pierre Turgeon. This is the last 35 years worth of hockey. What we don't find when we look at that group of players, with that cohort of players that have been this good this early in their career for this long a period of time, is players that burnt out. Like we just don't see players that accomplish what, historically speaking anyway, accomplish what Pettersson has accomplished over the course of his career, have, like almost no reason, inexplicable mid-career downturns. And I think it's important to remember this because, we're 3 games in to that $11.6 million per year, 8-year contract. And that deals a huge win for this team, in part because Pettersson has been throughout his career at the level of a player where you don't even worry about what the contract looks like. You're just happy that he chose you. These players, like, if you're as good as Pettersson has been for this long, there's no historical analogy for a player just not being good rather suddenly. And so I think that's important context to keep in mind, especially because what we're seeing with our eyes when we're watching this team play at the moment is that this team has a key cog, a two-way ace centerman who suddenly is sputtering, right? Who we're watching play, and it looks like there's some confidence issues, maybe a reluctance to shoot. The timing's off. There's just no juice there. But again, it would be an extreme historical anomaly for Pettersson to suddenly not be, one of the top players in hockey the way he has been in his career, until really the last 34 games, aside from, I suppose, a slow start to that 2021-2022 campaign.
Thomas, we're going to get flooded with texts and emails over something you just said, so I have to call you on it. You said suddenly sputtering. I'm paraphrasing, something like that. This goes back to last year, though.
50 games, Thomas, 50.
Well, sure. I mean, it's 34 games without a 5-on-5 goal, right? Going into tonight. That's troubling, no question. But it is still sudden, right? Like, when Pettersson signed that contract in early March of this year, right? He was a month removed from being, one of the NHL's 3 stars of the month in January, and he was still roughly on pace for 100 points, right? I mean, we're still talking about a player who finished the year with 89 points, right? So, you can quibble with suddenly, you can do the splits as arbitrarily as you want. You can point out that there's only been 25 points in however many games in the regular season since the All-Star break, including the playoffs, whatever. Look, it's been a rough stretch, but I still think sudden is fair. I mean, it's not like we're talking about a full calendar year here even, right? Pettersson was picking his teeth with the New York teams on that Eastern Conference road trip. That was in January, right? Like, he was still on pace for 100 points in late February, early March. Like, we're not talking about a huge stretch here. We're talking about a long period of time in which people have been concerned, and in which we've been talking about this in this market. But from a hockey perspective, right, 40 games isn't exactly a lifetime, right? It's 2.5 months, 3 months worth of hockey. That's sort of where we're at. So I think suddenly is fair, even if it's felt longer than that and felt more frustrating than that as we've gone through it.
So tonight, Thomas, we're going to get the Canucks don't have a game day skate. We're probably going to get our first look at Brannstrom in a Vancouver uniform on the left side. You had a scout on your show yesterday, Bucharest there. He did not have many good things to say. You call him Boogs. Can I say Boogs? Okay.
Bukala.
Oh, Bukala, that's it.
Bucharest.
So anyways, you had Boogs on yesterday, and he didn't have nice things to say about Brannstrom at all. Zero. Zilch. None. Your thoughts?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think Brannstrom is one of those divisive players. And look, I've talked about this a little bit with a player the Canucks have in their organization in Kirill Kudryavtsev, right? Which is that if you're a left-handed defenseman under 6 foot tall, right? And you're not super elite as a point producer, a la Quinn Hughes, right? Or super elite as a defensive player, a la Jared Spurgeon, it's really tough to make it in this league, right? And that's sort of where Brannstrom finds himself at the age of 25, right? Drafted in the same year as Elias Pettersson, was traded for Mark Stone, didn't develop into a star-level performer, although he did become an NHL regular for the Ottawa Senators, and was ultimately cut loose this summer, didn't make the Avalanche out of camp. He's at that inflection point that defensemen hit sometimes in their mid-20s, where he's not good enough offensively for you to ignore the mistakes he makes, and he's not good enough defensively to be the guy who's out there because they don't make mistakes, right? So that's sort of the pigeonholed divot in which his career rests at the moment, traded in as sort of a bit of bookkeeping to the Vancouver Canucks, who, internally I think are skeptical about his ability to defend well enough. That said, gentlemen, right? Erik Brannstrom would not be the first 25-year-old NHL defenseman to become or to figure things out defensively, right, at this stage of their career. The Canucks have one on their roster, by the way, in Filip Hronek, right, who was sort of, now he's a right-handed guy, a bigger player, so he was always going to have a little more license anyway. But in Detroit, until the year the Canucks traded for him, right, his defensive game was something of a question mark. Then he kind of figured it out and sustained that throughout last season. So, sometimes these players, especially defensemen, can work through it. I think the Canucks were, he was ultimately a throw-in for contractual reasons, like to make the money work in the Tucker Pullman trade. But I do think the Canucks were open-minded about what he could figure out, working with their people internally on the defensive side of the puck. Now, he went down to Abbotsford and he dominated to such a level that I think maybe the plans accelerated a bit in terms of factoring him into their NHL plans. Obviously, the club has struggled massively to move the puck without Quinn Hughes and Filip Hronek on the ice. It hasn't just been a third pair issue, although that's been the most popular local talking point. Like, it's also been a second pair issue for the Canucks in the early going this season. Brannstrom should help there. I think the question is, can you live with the errors, right? Like, can you live with the errors, or can he minimize the errors sufficiently to allow the things he does really well, right? Be a dynamic puck mover, quick outlet passes, get the puck moving in the right direction, walk the blue line, support the offensive attack, take that fourth man's ice. Like, can he defend well enough for all the things he does well to matter here? That to me is the big open question, and the question that perhaps we'll begin to get an answer for this evening on the edge of the Everglades.
Thomas, I forgot to ask you about yesterday. You made a comment that if you traded Pettersson today, struggles, cap, money, years, you said the 31 teams would be interested in him still. Can you explain that? Because I'm not there. And I called a few people last night, and some of them said that you're out to lunch because you got to have the cap space.
Call different people.
You got to have the cap space.
31.2 seconds or less.
In 30 seconds, why do you think? In 30 seconds, why do you think the 31 teams will want a guy who's struggling,
making that kind of money?
That money in that term. Go.
First of all, I did you a favor. You now know, based on who said I was out to lunch, whose opinions to prioritize listening to and whose to ignore. Secondly, the thing is that first line centermen, players who produce at this level for this long to start their careers, they don't grow on trees. We saw it with Jack Eichel. Jack Eichel had an unprecedented back surgery, hadn't played in almost a year, had actually less impressive production than Pettersson has to open their career. And when he ultimately got dealt, he netted a first. He netted Alex Tuck, a really good player. He netted Peyton Krebs, a top prospect, plus. I mean, that's all you need to know. Like, Jack Eichel's situation with the back injury was far riskier for teams taking on that money to work through. And he still netted, not a haul given his caliber, but a pretty good return for the Buffalo Sabres. That tells you what sorts of big swings teams are willing to take on players with Pettersson level talent. That would still apply in his case. There's a lot of teams that would view the fact that he's locked up for 8 years, given their trouble retaining players of his caliber, as actually a positive thing, as opposed to a negative. So I don't think there's any question. It's very obvious. Pettersson would still have immense value. We're not at the point where we're talking about a millstone contract by any means.
Agree or disagree, Thomas? Nobody gives people more food for thought than Thomas Drance. Yeah. Safe travels, my friend.
Yeah, have a safe trip to Philadelphia.
Thank you, gentlemen. Look forward to joining you next week when I'm off the road.
Awesome. Thanks, Thomas. Appreciate it.